The United States Senate earlier this week passed a $1.7 trillion funding bill, bringing the Congress one step closer to setting appropriations for the remainder of fiscal 2023 year and avoiding a shutdown on Friday evening. The Senate held votes on more than a dozen amendments reflecting both Democratic and Republican priorities. This before approving the bill, which now heads to the House. Republicans in that chamber overwhelmingly will oppose the measure, including Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, who has been leading one section of the Republicans massively opposing this spending. Here's what he said on the Senate.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kentucky.
If this is winning, I'm getting tired of winning. GOP leadership declares that this bill is a victory. But not unless you define victory as adding over $1 trillion in new deficit spending. So really there is a debate, a big debate within the Republican Party. Which is more important? Is it more important to add $45 billion to military spending, or is it more important not to add $1 trillion in deficit to our overall debt? We now have a $31 trillion debt. We're adding over $1 trillion a year, and yet Republican leadership says this is a victory because we're getting more military spending. But it's a victory at what expense? Are we actually more secure? Are we more safe? Is our national security more protected by spending more on the military? Or is our national security actually more threatened by incurring more debt? I would argue the latter. $31 trillion in debt is the #1 threat to our national security. It's time that we take our nation's health seriously, and it's time that we show concern for those who are being damaged and devastated by inflation. The inflation at the grocery store, at the gas pump, who does it hurt the worst? It hurts those on fixed income, senior citizens. It hurts the working class and the poor, those who have most of their expenditures that go towards consumption, towards their food and groceries and gas. People who spend 90% of what they earn on buying the stuff that allows them to live are the people that are decimated by inflation. So if there are people in this body who do care, who do really care about those who are struggling with the burden of inflation, the best way is quit digging the hole deeper, quit adding the debt, and do what even European countries can do, and that's begin to balance our budget.
Another Republican senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, has also been leading a massive campaign against a spending bill called it an abomination, which will negatively impact the Americans. Here's what the Senate had to say on Thursday.
According to the National Association of State Budget Officers, a report they just issued, states are sitting on a surplus cumulatively of over $250 billion. In addition to that, they have rainy day funds approaching over $130 billion. That totals up about $380 billion. This omnibus is going to spend somewhere around $1.7 trillion, and yet it's still not enough. Here is the 625 pages of earmarks. Almost $10 billion worth of additional money going into the states when they're sitting on close to $400 billion of surpluses. This is grotesque. Earmarks are the gateway drug to the mortgaging of our children's future. This abuse must stop. My amendment simply eliminates all the earmarks from this grotesque omnibus bill. I ask my colleagues to support the elimination of all the earmarks in this bill.
Louisiana Senator John Neely Kennedy has also been a vocal dissident of the $1.7 trillion spending bill, asserting that the legislation will skyrocket inflation and that will ravage the American dream. Here's what he told his constituents.
I voted against the budget, and I wanted to explain to the people in Louisiana why. Number one, this budget was basically put together by 3 people. Senator McConnell in the Senate, Senator Schumer in the Senate, and Speaker Pelosi in the House. But more to the point, here's the main reason I voted against the budget. Inflation. As I've said before, inflation is ravaging the American dream. It's a cancer on the American dream. And we're not going to get control of it until Congress stops spending so much money. Congress, in order to get control of inflation, has got to spend less money. We've got to slow the rate of growth of spending and debt. Now, look, I'm not naive. There are many people here in Washington, not just on the Democratic side. There are many big government Republicans as well. And their attitude is we can't possibly spend enough money. If they ran out of money to spend and couldn't borrow any more, they would think about taking out a reverse mortgage on Alaska to get the money. But there are enough Republicans on the Capitol Hill for us to be able to slow the rate of growth of spending. And this bill didn't do that.